Hello guys, today we're going to talk about the MTB frame crankset and bottom bracket compatibility issues. So first, let's briefly discuss about the difference between current 12-speed SRAM and Shimano crankset. So for Shimano, the whole series come with aluminum cranks. SLX and above levels, they will use Holotech 2 to save weight, and all of them will use the 24 millimeter steel diameter spindle, and it was basically used for a long time. And for SRAM Eagle Eyes, it's basically the same crank as Truvative cranksets, because Truvative was bought by SRAM back in 2004. And for GX and below level, they all use aluminum cranks. Some uses 6000 series, the others use 7000 series, and also GX and above use carbon cranks. So GX is the level that has two versions, one for aluminum, one for carbon. And for chainrings, SRAM has steel forged aluminum and CNC aluminum chainrings. And for the spindle diameter, for their early versions, early 11 speed or 10 speed, 9 speed generation, they're using the GXP, which is 24/22 millimeter spindle, and we will see that in the next slide. And for later 11 speed or all 12 speed, they introduced the dub standard, which is a 28.99 millimeter aluminum spindle, and currently we're using it for the SRAM 12 speed. So for spindle diameter, like we just talked about, Shimano will have 24 millimeter on both sides. Well, for SRAM GXP, it will have 24 millimeter on the drive side and 22 millimeter on the brake side. For dub is 28.99, or you may say 29 millimeter on both ends. And also a pretty common standard is the 30 millimeter aluminum spindle, which also 30 millimeter on both sides. This is currently widely used on some FSA race face or a lot of third-party cranksets. The next spec we will need to look into is the crankset Q factor. Basically, it's the left end of the crankset to the right end of the crankset. That was called the Q factor. Sometimes people will misconcept this with the stance. Well, the stance is the certain of the left paddle to the center of the right paddle. So let's say if you want more stability, you can use a large Q factor crank, or you can use a wider paddle, which will give you more stance, or a longer spindle for the paddles. Next is chainline. So for chainline, we have several different standards over here. And for non-boost, which is 135 times 9 QR or 142 by 12 through axle, the chainline is mostly 49 millimeter. And for the boost spacing, which is 148 by 12 through axle, some of them I would say is 52 millimeter, but we also have 55 millimeter chain line. This is actually introduced by, I would say, Scott and some other frame manufacturers. The reason for that is the chainring will be outbounded by 3 millimeter, which gives the customer the ability to run larger chainrings. This is pretty important, especially for the pro riders, because we amateurs usually use, for example, 30 tooth, 32 tooth, while the pro riders, they will usually use 36 or even up to 38 or 40 tooth. And the last one is the Super Boost, which is 157 by 12 through axle, and the chain line for that is 56.5 millimeter. So in order to select the correct crankset, Q factor, and chain line, you will need to consult the frame manufacturer to ask them about what chain line did you did your frame come with, then you can basically, according to that, if you're boot spacing, you will need to take special care. If you select, for example, 7100, that will be 52 millimeter. If you select 7120 SLX crankset, that will be 55 millimeter chain line. Crank length. The mainstream products, for example, Shimano and SRAM, they will basically provide crank length from 165 to 175 millimeter, but some third parties, they will provide more options. Sometimes the crank length could be as low as 155 millimeter or even down to 145 millimeter. So for the crank length, we need to select it based on your instep height, your riding style, and BB height, etc. Okay, now we have different manufacturers. Here I listed some big brands with their crank arms only option and crank arm plus chain ring. So I listed the weight. So if you see the weight with the chain ring tooth number inside the bracket, that will be crank arm plus the chain ring weight. If you don't see that, for example, 32 tooth, that will be the crank arm only weight. And then I also listed the spindle standard. For example, 24 millimeter is Shimano standard, 29 millimeter is SRAM, and for race face, most of them they are 30 millimeters, but also they have 24 millimeters Shimano standard. Okay, so I'll give you some time to take a screenshot if you want to take a look at the weight versus the manufacturers. And also the next slide is some smaller brands, for example, 5DAV, Can Creek, E13 Hope, and Praxis. Okay, now let's move on to bottom bracket, one of the most difficult standard in mountain biking. So here we have two main options, and the left one is the BSA. We have three standards, but for mountain biking, we mostly only use the original BSA. It was introduced a long time ago, and but recently it found more popularity on current mountain bikes, mainly because of the it is much easier to replace the bottom bracket, and it will have 68, 73, 83, or 100 millimeter width, but 100 millimeter is usually reserved for fat bikes. For press fit, there are a ton of, I would say a ton of options over here. You have BB30, you have PF30, you have the original press fit, and the BB386. So all of them will basically give you different widths, and also the inner diameter of the frame bottom bracket will be different. For example, BB30, the inner diameter is 42 millimeter, PF30 is 46, the press fit is 41, and BB386 is 46 millimeter. So really complicated, but there's one way to figure it out. I will provide some cheat sheets for us to look into it. Okay. So before we look into the cheat sheet, we have some compatibility tricks. So the frame will decide your BB type. That's easy to understand because if you have a BSA, you cannot really fit into a press fit unless you do something crazy. And secondly, the frame will decide the chain line, right? The frame designer will design, using a specific chain line, and that's what you will need. And thirdly, the bottom bracket will decide the spindle diameter. That's pretty easy to understand. If you're using a Shimano bottom bracket, there's no way you can fit in a SRAM crankset. Okay. Now let's move on to the cheat sheet that I just talked about. So for BSA, your frame BB width could be, if we ignore fat bike as of now, then that would be 68, 73, or 83. Then the crank spindle diameter you can use is actually a lot, right? You can use Shimano 24 millimeter, SRAM GXP or Dub, or 30 millimeter, or Praxis 30/28 millimeter. That Praxis one is similar to GXP. One side is 30, the other side is 28. Then the frame BB inner diameter is around 33.6 to 33.9 millimeter. So that will be the same for all BSA frames. For press fit, let's first take a look at BB86/92. That will be most commonly used in mountain bike standards, and the frame BB width is 89.5 or 92 or 107. Why is not BB86, right? You have the BB86 in the name, but there's no 86 millimeter. The reason for that is BB86, the 86 millimeter is used in the road bike. For mountain bike, there's no 86 millimeter. Then for the crank spindle diameter, actually you can use basically all the diameters, and the frame BB inner diameter will be 41 millimeter. For BB30, then the frame BB width is 68, 73, and 83, similar to BSA. And for the crank spindle diameter, basically you can use all of them. But remember, for Shimano, this one, you cannot really buy Shimano bottom brackets, but you can buy the third-party bottom brackets that will fit with Shimano crankset. And for the BB wise, it is 42 millimeter bearing direct press in. So for example, BB86 or 92, that 41 millimeter, when you install the bottom bracket, the bearing is actually inside a shell, and you press the shell inside your frame. But for BB30 is you press the bearings directly into the frame. That's the difference. And next we get PF30, BB386, BB392. So these three are actually the same thing, except the frame BB width is different. So I've listed here. And crank spindle diameter is similar to BB30. Shimano one you cannot buy from Shimano, you can only buy from the third party. And the BB inner diameter is 46 millimeter. Then the last one is the most troublesome, which is Track BB90 or 95. Track actually used this standard mainly from 2013 to 2016, or some time frame around it. And the crank spindle diameter, it can only use Shimano 24 millimeter or SRAM GXP. All others, if you're not buying a specific, bottom brackets that transfer the limited inner diameter to a larger one, then you cannot use it. Basically, it's limited to Shimano or early 11 speed SRAM cranks. And for inner diameter wise, it's 37 millimeter bearing direct press in. Okay, so here I have the I downloaded some install instructions from SRAM, and you can go to SRAM to look into that, or zoom in to read all the details. But basically, it's really complicated. Okay, some recommendation on my side. I would say if you're using, the Shimano group sets, or even if you're not using Shimano group sets, but you want to choose a lightweight, durable crank arms, I would suggest the Shimano SLX 12-speed M71000 or 7120, depending on your frame, your chain line. The reason for that is it's basically the same weight or even lighter than the XT version. And if you select a third-party chainring, no matter it's Absolute Black or the Wolf Tooth, something like that, then the total weight will be somewhere around 570 grams. And that will be only 20 grams heavier than the GX or X1 carbon cranksets from SRAM. And most importantly, it has the 24 millimeter steel spindle. You can, there's no way you can break it. And also because the spindle diameter is pretty short, then the BB bearing size is larger comparing to SRAM DAP, and arguably more durable. And the last one will be it's extremely easy to install or remove. For the SRAM one, if you're a center bolt, you tighten that to 54 Newton meter, and you have some grease on it when you tighten that. And when you want to remove it, you'll probably need to, have roughly 100 Newton meter of force in order to lose that. I've had that experience, and it was really painful. Okay, BB recommendation. So here I will recommend the scent level SMBB 80. The first reason is it's a gold color. It looks pretty good, and also it has different frame width options. And thirdly, it's not really expensive comparing to the XT level BBs. And for scent series, they are downhill series, and the I tried this one for over a year, and I just removed the cranks to see how the BB how durable it is. It seems like it's extremely durable. I cannot really see any wears by rotating that bearings. So that will be it. Thank you very much for listening to this discussion. I hope you have a nice day.